We are live. Take it away, Andy.
Welcome to OZ NewsHour. I'm Andy Hagans here with Jimmy Atkinson. Today is January 27th, 2025, and we are covering the most important stories in the world of opportunity zones.
We're talking about opportunity zones. We're talking about opportunity zones.
Andy, I'm getting a really bad echo here. We got a little bit of a feedback issue, I think, on my end. I'll try to resolve that, and we're going to start talking about opportunity zones in just a moment. But first, are you looking to take your opportunity zone strategy to the next level, but you don't know where to go? OZ Insiders offers comprehensive premium content and networking to help you get started. Our monthly masterclass meetings cover a wide range of topics, from fundamentals to advanced, ensuring you have what you need to thrive. As a member of OZ Insiders, you'll get access to our exclusive online community, monthly group coaching, and monthly master classes, providing you with valuable OZ networking opportunities and guidance from the very best opportunity zone professionals in the industry. Whether you're a beginner or looking to go to the next level, we have what you need. Visit ozinsiders.com to learn more. That's ozinsiders.com. Andy, back to you.
I'll take it away. And while Jimmy fixes his technical difficulty, that's part of the fun of live TV. We like to live stream OZ NewsHour on the fourth Monday, or last Monday, I should say, of every month. So it's all part of the fun, Jimmy. And I do want to give a tip of the cap to Mr. Atkinson, my co-host here, because he has a brand new studio, or redesigned studio, I should say. And Jimmy, so far it's looking good. I know you're still pressing some buttons, plugging in a few cords, carry the one, denominator, etc. But I think when it's all set up, it's going to be a fantastic headquarters for all of our opportunity zones content. And I have to say, this episode that we have today, there's been a lot of excitement in the past month, in between the election and then into the new year. What's going to happen this year, because there's been so much talk about opportunity zones extension and reform, and the fact that President Trump now taking office. Everyone in the industry is pretty much holding their breath, waiting to see what's going to happen. Actually, I shouldn't say everyone, because there is a full court press going on, a lobbying effort, which, Jimmy, I haven't really seen since, well, I don't know, ever, because I wasn't really a part of the industry when the original act was passed.
Yeah, and I wasn't either. And thanks for noticing my new studio backdrop here, Andy. I got a playbook on how to redesign my studio, and I'm putting it to good use. I did fix the technical difficulty, by the way. The issue was I had the YouTube live stream open in a different window. So that's why I was actually hearing me talk a few seconds late from what I was saying. So we got it all sorted out now, though. Andy, that's right, though. We have Trump is back in office. The title of this episode is Trump's Back, the first week. What's happening with opportunity zones? A lot of good stuff happening with opportunity zones. Really a full court press, as you alluded to, Andy, on lobbying to get opportunity zones renewed and made permanent over the last several weeks by various constituents within the opportunity zones industry, Andy. So that's what we're going to be breaking down for you on the first part of today's episode.
Yeah, and it should be said, Jimmy, I don't think there's really been any news per se, right? We don't have tax legislation. We don't even have a full cabinet yet. But what we are seeing is just a lot of excitement and a sustained lobbying effort. And I think with the potential tax legislation that we hope is passed this year, there's going to be lobbying from all kinds of actors, not just the opportunity zones industry, right? Like with the SALT deduction, that's now back in play. And I think maybe some other real estate and financial related areas of tax law. But Jimmy, why don't you start us off? What were some of the most important articles, op-eds, lobbying efforts that you have noticed so far, even in this first week, first month of the new administration?
Yeah, Andy, I think we've got 4 or 5 of them, if I'm not mistaken. So the first big thing that happened, by the way, this is news. This just released 3 weeks ago, is that the Novogradac Opportunity Zones Working Group has been drafting a letter of recommendations to make to the new administration, no matter who it was going to end up being. For the past several months, this group has been meeting, and I meet with them regularly as well, trying to put together some new ideas for not just extending opportunity zones, but improving it as well. So this letter was finally submitted to the Trump transition team on January 7th. 2025, Andy. And if you've got a few minutes, I can take you through some of the most important recommendations that they made in this letter addressed to that Trump administration transition team. This is a 16-page letter. I won't go through every single item in it, but this is the most influential, I think the most, if not one of the most influential working groups or industry leaders in the opportunity zones industry. I'm going to scroll down to page 5 is when they actually start making their recommendations. The first few pages are just kind of preamble and recap of the program. But two big things that the Novogradac Opportunity Zone Working Group wants to do is, one, they want the initiative extended by an additional 2 years. So they're still asking to extend the OZ deadline to 2028. The second thing they want to do is they want to make it permanent. Now, within this extension, it's a lot of what we've been talking about here in this program for the last couple of years since this Opportunity Zones Transparency Extension and Improvement Act was first introduced a few years back, extending the deadline out by an additional 2 years, making opportunity zones more transparent, enabling smaller, more flexible investments, essentially allowing funds to invest into other funds, and then also promoting greater OZ investment in rural communities as well. Andy, I'll stop there for a minute to see if you have any reaction to that. And then I want to talk about some of the long-term programmatic changes that the Novogradac Opportunity Zone Working Group is calling for.
Well, I have a larger question, Jimmy. I guess to put this into context, do you think that officials or staff in the Trump administration are actually reading this? I mean, where does Novogradac kind of fit in the hierarchy of folks who are lobbying? Are they probably the most prominent or most important, I don't want to say lobbyist, but a voice, I should say, that the industry really has with an actual real listening ear within the administration?
Yeah, in terms of community development programs, I would say Novogradac is in the top tier of groups that the administration might be hearing from. And that extends to a variety of different community development programs, right? New market tax credits, historic tax credits, affordable housing, opportunity zones being one of those. And then within just opportunity zones, within that broader community development bucket, opportunity zones themselves, and Novogradac has been here from the very get-go. They were involved in lobbying for this program dating back to, I believe, 2015, a couple years before the legislation was initially enacted. Was when this working group actually was first established. It's become a lot more prominent and relevant in our lives over the past few years since opportunity zones actually became reality in 2017. But this working group predates that, which is quite impressive. They've been working with the Economic Innovation Group and members of Congress on tax-related matters, community development-related matters for many years, Andy. So I would say they're in the upper echelon of lobbying groups for opportunity zone renewal in terms of opportunity zones, in terms of all matters tax related, and then you zoom back and you look at all matters political. Opportunity zones obviously a very small part of that overall universe of U.S. politics, but within that small universe, Novogradac's about as big as it gets, Andy.
Understood. So when you hear Novogradac, it's not just this isn't a random letter that's being published or sent to the administration. It's from, an organization with a seat at the table with a lot of
and with members from dozens of different accounting and legal firms all over the country, and fund teams as well, project developers all over the country.
So what were some of the other programmatic changes or suggestions that were included in the letter?
Yeah, so we walked through what they want to do in terms of giving this current iteration of opportunity zones 2 additional years. But in addition to that, Novogradac and really the industry, the entire industry, but Novogradac's kind of leading the charge here with this letter. They want opportunity zones to be made a permanent part of the tax code. So what they're calling for here is permanence of the OZ incentive with regularly scheduled opportunity zone redesignations. And that's important because you don't want to just set the opportunity zones once and then those are the opportunity zones for the next 10, 20, 100 years, right? You want to be able to come back probably every 7 to 10 years. You'd want to come back and redesignate as different zones fall into and get pulled out of poverty. They're also asking for rolling deferral periods, which differs from this current iteration of opportunity zones, Andy, as you know very well. The current deferral date is the same for everybody, and it's written into the statute, December 31, 2026. Under this idea, the thought is that everybody would have a 7-year deferral no matter when they came into the program. That's going to be much costlier. I don't know if that one has serious viability of making it into legislation because it is going to make the program much more expensive. Might be tough for some members of Congress to swallow, but it's an idea. And then I won't go through every single one of these. There's quite a few. And we will link to this letter in the show notes for today's episode, which you can find at opportunityzones.com. But a couple other ideas they have is changing how the opportunity zones are designated in the first place. One of the biggest criticisms of the program this time around was that there's some census tracts that weren't truly low income, that were already kind of on the upswing. The data was a few years old, and they weren't really impoverished the way they should be. So Novogradac's calling for tightening up those requirements a little bit. And then the other thing they want to do kind of to counterbalance that is to allow for additional tracts to be nominated, not just 25% of a state's census, low-income census tracts, but they call for up to 35% of eligible census tracts to be designated. And then I'll just go through the one final point here, Andy, and then I'll pause and we can kind of move on, but allowing for non-capital gain investment. So currently, this iteration of Opportunity Zones, it's a capital gains program. You have to trigger a capital gain and roll over that gain into an Opportunity Zone in order to be eligible for all of the tax advantages that come with Opportunity Zone investing. This idea would call for after-tax dollars, non-gains dollars. Maybe you have ordinary income, or maybe you can just pull some money out of savings or reallocate capital. It doesn't necessarily have to be a gain that you invest into an Opportunity Zone program. Now, you wouldn't get that 7-year deferral period, but you would get the tax benefit of the 10-year hold, which is no tax on the appreciation within the OZ investment, Andy.
Got it. So this is a little bit of a wish list, I suppose, and you know, final legislation, if it includes an extension, and God willing, it will look a little bit different than what's being proposed here, right? But you might as well, Jimmy, you know, I read Art of the Deal. You might as well start with a big ask, right? Because who knows where you'll end up.
That's right, Andy. So I think this is a big ask. It's a big laundry list or wish list of not every single possible idea they came up with, because we threw a lot of ideas at the wall in this Opportunity Zones working group. But some of the most popular ones that they thought had some chance of coming to fruition. So time will tell. And Andy, I do think, you know, Trump has been in office now for 1 week. We haven't gotten the OZ extension yet, so I don't know what he's waiting for. No, just kidding. It takes a long time to put this type of legislation together. I do think.
Well, Jimmy, what about an executive order? There have been a lot of executive orders. Maybe we could just stroke of the pen, you know?
Yeah, those are overused, aren't they?
Yeah,
dating back several presidencies. Well, I'll stay out of that, Andy. But yeah, I think it's going to be a priority of Congress some point in this first 100-day period to introduce some sort of tax legislation. By the way, I don't think it'll get passed within the first 100 days. I think this is the type of thing that's probably going to get dragged out until December, probably the midnight hour, late December this year, before tax legislation either comes through or doesn't. And I'm fingers crossed that it does, and I think it probably will. But like we've mentioned on this podcast time and again over the past several weeks, is that margin in the House is very narrow for the Republican Party right now. So they can't afford to lose any votes. So I think it's going to be a lot of horse trading, and a lot of time will pass before we get to the finish line with tax legislation. And OZ should be part of that tax legislation toward the end of the year.
absolutely. So this Novogradac letter, Novogradac being the heavy hitter, this was the artillery, right? In this full court press to sway opinion, to sway policy, to lobby. But Jimmy, there was a lot of other content published, including by some of our members of our OZ Insiders premium community. But why don't we start with this op-ed? Was this an op-ed?
This is an op-ed in Governing Magazine by Steve Glickman and Jonathan Towers. So if you've been in the OZ industry for a few years, you're probably familiar with these two names. If you're not, I'll tell you that Steve Glickman was the original CEO and co-founder of the Economic Innovation Group, which was and is the bipartisan economic think tank in Washington, D.C. that really spearheaded the creation of opportunity zones dating back to 2015. And they work very closely with Novogradac Company and their Novogradac Opportunity Zones Working Group. Steve Glickman's now in the private sector. I guess he has been in the private sector, but now he's a consultant for Opportunity Zone funds. And one such fund is the Arc'teryx Impact Fund. And Jonathan Tower is the managing partner of that fund here. So those are the two authors of this article titled Opportunity Zones Are a Big Success. Let's make them a lot bigger. So in this article, they recap a lot of what we've been talking about already, how great opportunity zones are, how they date back to the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, how it's benefiting over 8,700 different communities all over the country, how it's broadly bipartisan supported. But then toward the end of the article here, they make some recommendations of how they want to think bigger. So a little bit like a wish list that Novogradac has submitted. They want to change things a little bit, like Novogradac. Novogradac, remember, wanted to take 25% of America's lowest income census tracts and expand it to 35% as opportunity zones. This article, Steve Glickman and Jonathan Tower call for it to be expanded to 40% of America's low income census tracts. And so they're asking for essentially the same thing that Novogradac is in broad strokes, which is, hey, this has been a great program that's driven a lot of capital investment that wouldn't have otherwise flowed into these communities, into our nation's poorest zip codes all over the country. Let's keep this going. We've already invested over $100 billion in opportunity zones, not these two personally, but as an industry as a whole. They think that there's runway to create the world's first $1 trillion economic development program with opportunity zones. And I think they're right. It won't happen under this iteration, but if this program does become permanent, does get reauthorized for another run, I do think that sometime over the next couple of decades, it could hit that $1 trillion mark. I've estimated we're already above 150 billion. So like Novogradac, they want to make this permanent. They want to make it better. They want to expand it, make it bigger than ever. Andy, we also had op-eds in BizNow and an article in this magazine right here, the Novogradac Journal of Tax Credits, which I'll get to in a moment. But let's go to this BizNow article, Andy. This one had contributions from a couple of our Opportunity Zone mastermind group members at OZ Insiders. Blake Christian and Jill Homan are both quoted in this article. So this one, also written just a couple weeks ago, titled Opportunity Zone Industry Gearing Up for Expansion Under Trump. So BizNow is read by mostly real estate professionals, I would say. Andy, is that right? Commercial real estate executives all over the country. So this is kind of a more basic catch-up article on, what opportunity zones are, what they've done under Donald Trump's first term, under the Biden administration. Now, with Donald Trump in office for a second time around, it's very likely that the program's going to get renewed. Here's a quote here from Jill Homan, who is one of our valued members at OZ Insiders. She says, there's more conversation, more excitement around opportunity zones. And I do think that has to do with the change in administration. So it's actually getting feedback from Blake Christian and Jill Homan on what the Trump election has meant to opportunity zones. They've both noticed an uptick in interest. Blake Christian at HCVT, it says he's a lawyer here, but he's actually a CPA who helps clients set up OZ funds. I was flooded with calls in December, he said. And I think that echoes a lot of what we've been hearing and seeing, Andy, is just a lot more excitement about opportunity zones since early November, mid-November, once it was clear that Trump was back in the White House and that the Republicans had swept the House and Senate, making it much more likely that opportunity zones would get some sort of extension, possibly permanent renewal later in 2025, Andy. So a lot of buzz in these first two articles. I'll pull up this third one, but reaction from you, Andy, so far?
Well, I appreciate Jill and Blake, in that article, because as you said, it's a little bit more for a general real estate audience. But I think that's important, right? If Novogradac is the heavy artillery, well, we need infantry out there spreading the word, on the ground floor, on the ground level, about the benefits of the Opportunity Zones program. Because ultimately, I think for that to be included in tax legislation, there needs to be the perception in Congress that there's popular support from everyday citizens, everyday voters for the program. By the way, we got a question from Rob in the live stream, in the live chat. Will you be posting any of these links? Yes, absolutely. We're going to post all of these on our show notes, always published at opportunityzones.com. And by the way, one of the reasons that we do OZ NewsHour as a live stream, as a live show on YouTube, is that we like to handle any questions live. Jimmy, you also do your office hours every month where you take questions live, and the community interaction is a big part of the show. So please chime in if you have any questions or comments as we're going through the news today. Don't be shy. Thank you, Rob. Jimmy, the last article, I understand it quoted a very handsome guy in that article. Is that right?
Well, that's right. So this article actually came out in December, Andy, but I was holding off until I got the physical print copy at my address here. I got this a few days after we shot the last episode of OZ NewsHour, but right here on page 10 is this article: Opportunity Zones experts discuss the present and future of Opportunity Zones. And what this is, and I know I'm sharing the screen of the digital version also, which we'll link to in our show notes. It is a recap of the panel that I was one of the panelists on at the Novogradac Opportunity Zone Summit back in November. And it paints an interesting picture here, which is true. We did convene just hours after the election day results were announced. It was clear that Trump had won the presidency. What was unclear was whether the Republican Party had won the House and Senate yet. I think the Senate was more or less locked in, but the House was still up for grabs, if I recall correctly. But it looked very much like it was probably a 90% plus chance that the Republicans were going to sweep. So a lot of the remarks I gave were kind of assuming that the Republicans would sweep. But a good recap of our panel. It quotes me here talking about the Opportunity Zone survey that we ran last fall, Andy, and we came out with our results a couple of weeks before the Novogradac Opportunity Zones Summit in DC. So I talk a lot about that and how last night at the time, makes it much more likely that we would get an extension. Jason Watkins, who's the chair of the aforementioned Novogradac Opportunity Zones Working Group, was the moderator of this panel. And he has one interesting point that I thought that he made during the discussion was kind of a counterpoint to the survey results that my team ran. And I thought it was interesting also, Andy, that the survey results indicated that investors were much more likely to make an Opportunity Zone investment if there was some sort of extension, even though the main benefit of Opportunity Zones isn't really in that extension so much, but it's in the 10-year hold. So if you have a capital gain now, don't bother waiting until there's an extension or not, because the earlier you get in, the earlier your 10-year clock starts ticking. That's really the most valuable part of the program. Although I suppose there's a lot to be said about just having the full weight of the federal government behind the program and making sure that it is going to get renewed. Gives investors a lot more confidence. Anyways, Andy, that's about it in terms of the those four big articles that are kind of bubbling up to the surface over the last few weeks, showing the lobbying effort that's going on behind the scenes, showing what can be done with Opportunity Zones to improve it moving forward.
Yeah, and Jimmy, it's like the article at BizNow. It's the message of the program's success. It can almost seem repetitive to you or me, or probably some of the folks who listen to the show or watch the show who are Opportunity Zone super fans. We're kind of like, well, obviously the program is wildly successful. That's old news. But it's something that just needs to be repeated over and over, because I think at some level, a program like this, any sort of tax break, is a messaging war, right? And for your side to win, like, you do need some on the ground support. You need Congress people who feel like, the popular perception of the program is that it's something that's helping the economy overall and that's benefiting society overall. So I do think it's important. I don't really think it's possible to be too repetitive, overly repetitive, beating that drum of the program's success, which is backed up by data. So hopefully Jill and Blake and everyone who's publishing this content, let's do it all year, folks. Let's do it all the way up until December 31st at the 23rd hour, Jimmy, as you said, to make sure that it is addressed in tax legislation this year.
Well, and sneak peek, Andy. Speaking of the Novogradac Journal of Tax Credits, I was just invited to author an article in their Opportunity Zones issue, which is coming out in March. So it won't be next month we'll cover it, but the month after, during our March episode, hopefully we'll have another physical hard copy, and we can cover some of those pieces in that Opportunity Zones issue of the Novogradac Journal of Tax Credit. I think there'll be a lot of interesting ideas that get published in that piece, including by yours truly. Hopefully, I'm planning on speaking a lot about our recent survey and what it means in light of the Trump presidency. Andy, I know we've got a lot more Opportunity Zones news to share, but I did want to take a moment to just discuss what's been going on lately at OZ Insiders. And for those who may be new to the program, OZ Insiders is my Opportunity Zones mastermind group, where I help you get to the next level with your Opportunity Zones strategy, whether you are an investor or a developer, or you're a project sponsor or a fund manager trying to raise capital. Maybe you're trying to network within the Opportunity Zones community. Maybe you're trying to get from point A to point B with your Opportunity Zone structuring or your fundraising. Whatever your needs are, I can get you plugged in to the right place. So I'd encourage you to visit ozinsiders.com to learn more about that group, OZ Insiders. We do private Opportunity Zone mastermind meetings, master classes, and group coaching every single month. And I just want to go to the calendar page right now, which is available at ozinsiders.com/calendar to discuss. Let's discuss our last month's meeting, first of all, which was a master class taught by Coni Rathbone, prominent national Opportunity Zones attorney. She taught a class on OZ funds and securities law, basically went through soup to nuts how to get ready to raise capital from investors with an Opportunity Zone Opportunity Zone fund, and the securities law implications of doing so. So that was a fascinating class taught by one of the best in Coni Rathbone. This, or I should say next month's class, which we do on the second Monday of every month, will be taught by Todd Vitzthum at Akara, and his topic is underwriting real estate deals in 2025. So that's what we have coming up on tap over the next few weeks at OZ Insiders. Andy.
Yeah, I got to say, Connie, she doesn't mess around. I think it's a lot of folks who are interested in raising capital. You got to get informed about securities law to do so safely, I suppose, So I really enjoyed her masterclass. I'm also looking forward to the underwriting one, Jimmy, the upcoming underwriting, because I want to know how to underwrite in 2025. And I also want to learn what the heck interest rates are going to do this year. And maybe nobody knows, but Jimmy, I'm always waiting around for that one definitive statement from a true expert who's going to settle once and for all what our interest rate's going to do in 2025. So that may or may not happen at the next masterclass, but there's always hope, right?
There's always hope. I think there's going to be, maybe there's going to be a couple of rate cuts by the Fed here going forward, but the 10-year Treasury yield seems to be ticking up. I think they've priced in all those rate cuts that they were expecting. And now I think the long-term thought is that interest rates have to go up at some point, possibly sooner rather than later. But time will tell.
Jimmy, the 10-year is throwing a temper tantrum. It's being I think we need to spank the 10-year and say, stop it. Just stop it, because this is not appropriate right now. We all thought rates were going down, and you are not cooperating, 10-year.
That's right. Well, what do we got next, Andy?
We have an announcement from an Opportunity Zones project sponsor. And Jimmy, I've never heard of the domain companies before, But what caught my eye about this story, and tip of the cap to Jill Homan, because I learned of the story through her excellent newsletter, OZ Outlook. But what really caught my eye is that they secured the domain companies. That is, they secured $218 million in financing for Estella, a mixed-use development located in a South Bronx, New York opportunity zone. Jimmy, that's a big dollar amount.
It is 218.6 million to be exact, Andy. Every month we try to highlight a big success story capitalized on by different opportunity zone developers anywhere in the country. And this one comes to us from the South Bronx. A lot of opportunity zones in New York City, not a lot in Manhattan, but quite a few in Queens and the Bronx and some of the other boroughs. And this one I wasn't familiar with. So Andy, I'm glad you brought it to my attention. I know you read Jill Homan's newsletter every week and you flagged it for me. And this one is great that they were able to capitalize on this $218.6 million in financing on this project. And best part is, by the way, it's already, the project is complete. It's been under construction for a few years. It completed as of May 2023, and it's 90% leased already. So this is providing, 544 mixed income apartment units. So that's a lot of housing that this one project is providing, making a little dent in that housing shortage that our nation faces. And opportunity zones probably not going to be the complete solution to that huge problem, but at least helping move things in the right direction. Not to mention 10,000 square feet of ground floor retail. Also, pretty cool project here. And congrats to domain companies for securing that Freddie Mac long-term permanent financing.
Yeah, and Jimmy, it's that long-term financing, that refinance. Usually, when a project is fully leased up or mostly leased up, like this one is here, that's really, I mean, if you're going to take a victory lap ever as a sponsor, and maybe you never totally should, right, until it's totally gone for full circle. But when you're 90% leased up and you lock in that long-term financing, I think a congratulations is always due for the executives, for all of the hardworking people involved in the project, and for the investors, who have to be feeling pretty good. Jimmy, I forgot our fourth story. I was about to move on to our picks of the month, but we have big news. And Jimmy, I think there's a lot of excitement behind this event. It's a new year. It's the first OZ Pitch Day of 2025. It's the first OZ Pitch Day of President Trump's second term in office.
That's right, Andy. We do 3 OZ Pitch Days per year. This is OZ Pitch Day Spring 2025. The first one of the year is always exciting to kick off the new year. This is scheduled for March 6th, 2025. Registration is now open. We always open it a couple months in advance. It's free to attend if you've never been to an OZ Pitch Day before, or you're not sure what it is. It's a one-day online event that I conduct and I host via Zoom. It's completely free to attend. And what it is a mix of Opportunity Zone education and Opportunity Zone showcase of deals. So essentially I help bring the marketplace to you. We'll have anywhere between 10 to 12 sponsors of different Opportunity Zone projects come and present their deals that are open to investment. If you're an investor looking for a deal, I would highly encourage you to learn more about OZ Pitch Day. You can head to ozpitchday.com to read more about this program and to get registered so you can show up live on March 6th, 2025. Andy, are you going to be there?
I will certainly be there. And, we had another question in the live chat, Jimmy, from Rhonda about the debt ceiling and how that may interact with opportunity zones. But I also wanted to plug, you have some great panels at every pitch day. And I know that one of the panels, you'll have several experts talking about legislation and policy and basically what's going to happen this year and during Trump's term. So Rhonda, if we don't perfectly answer your question today, definitely register for OZ Pitch Day because there's going to be a lot more information during those panels. But Jimmy, any thoughts on how proposals about the debt ceiling may interact with opportunity zones reform or extension, or are those really two separate issues that are decoupled?
This is a little bit above my pay grade. I do know that there's a few different ways to skin this cat. and I don't know if they've fully decided yet, but one thought is that they would have one huge bill that would take care of a lot of different priorities. If you ask Trump, he might say it's one bold, big, beautiful bill, something like that. And it would take care of the debt ceiling. It would take care of immigration. It would take care of tax legislation, just one enormous bill that encompasses all of those things. The other thought is that they might introduce two bills, one that would do just tax legislation, including OZs, and then one that would do the debt ceiling and everything else, essentially. I don't know if they've decided on which one they're going to do yet. It's still a little bit early. He's only been in the White House for 1 week. Rhonda, I think if you ask this question again next month, hopefully I have a better answer for you. And certainly we will cover this in a lot of detail at OZ Pitch Day on March 6th. I think we'll know a lot of facts by then.
Yeah, hopefully Congress is going to play ball, Jimmy. Hopefully they will be cooperative. Hopefully the 10-year is going to be more cooperative and interest rates, and it's all going to come together this year. But we're going to see what happens. We're going to talk about it during OZ Pitch Day. Jimmy, I think that is it for the hard news. We're almost out of time, but before we go, what is your pick of the month? What are you reading, watching, or listening to in the world of opportunity zones that you would recommend to our audience?
Well, Andy, I'm going to toot my own horn here a little bit because I put a lot of work into this podcast episode that I released at the end of last year, which is titled, Will Trump Save Opportunity Zones in 2025? And this is a podcast episode that was actually a webinar that I hosted in November, which recaps pretty much everything I know about opportunity zone legislation, the likelihood for extension, the likelihood of permanent renewal, reauthorization, and exactly what will likely be included in each one of those different components of opportunity zone legislation. So if this episode's only wet your whistle a little bit and you want a little bit more detail on everything that I think may or may not come to fruition with opportunity zones later this year, I'd highly encourage you to watch this episode, Will Trump Save Opportunity Zones in 2025? And that's essentially what he is being tasked with by the opportunity zones community. It's not fully his decision, right? It does fall on the shoulders of Congress to actually take action. But we got to have a nice looking thumbnail here with Trump holding up something funny like that, right? So I like the title. Essentially, this is, will opportunity zones be extended and renewed in 25? Highly encourage you to check that out. Andy, I know you watched it and you said it was really good. So thank you for that feedback.
Yeah, and the thumbnail is great too. I tell you folks, when you put Donald Trump on one of your YouTube thumbnails, it seems to increase engagement. Sometimes we get hate mail, like we got a little bit of hate mail today, someone angry that we're talking about the Trump administration. But the fact of the matter is, if you're interested in opportunity zone news or news about any kind of tax reform, tax legislation, real estate related, financial policy, economic policy, you're going to be talking about Congress. You're going to be talking about politics. You're going to be talking about President Trump. Is that right, Jimmy?
That's right. And speaking of President Trump, Andy, I know he has a little bit to do with your pick of the month as well, right?
So my pick of the month is Melania's Inauguration Day look. And Jimmy, I probably watched more of this Inauguration Day than I have for previous inaugurations. And I have to say, I very rarely notice a lady's wardrobe. You won't catch me watching the Emmys or the Oscars or any of the red carpet stuff. Like, I've never seen any of that. So I have to say, as a dude, as a guy, if I notice what a lady is wearing, it's probably very distinctive, because let's be honest, 99% of the time, I don't even notice. And when I saw Melania's outfit with the hat, and I think the hat kind of did get into the popular media, there was a lot of buzz about it, but I noticed it right away. And I thought, that's very distinctive, very classy. It almost reminded me of like Jackie Kennedy or something. But at the same time, it has a timeless look to it. And I thought she pulled it off beautifully. Jimmy, you know me, I'm a traditionalist. I love a lady in a hat. So I thought the hat looked great. And then later on that day at the inauguration ball, she was wearing a beautiful evening gown, and again, very distinctive design, but at the same time classy. So for a dude to notice anything, ladies fashion related, it really has to break through. So my congrats to her and her stylists. Is that what it's called, Jimmy? Her stylist or her designer?
I'll allow it. You've got an eye for this stuff, Andy.
Yeah. So my tip of the cap to Melania and her staff and stylist. She looks great. Kudos to her. And, the first day of the Trump administration, Jimmy, it's just a day, but it was symbolic. And I think for the Opportunity Zones program, second Trump term may represent an extension, a reform. We're going to find out this year. So please, to all of our viewers and listeners, stay subscribed to the show. We will be back next month with our next edition. Thank you for watching and listening. And Jimmy, thank you for joining me today. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you, Andy. Let's do it again real soon.